Charlotte's a proponent of exponential thinking in an exponentially changing world. And if you think that Ubuntu is hard to understand, that one is you really have to grab hold of to know what that means. Charlotte cautions the world is changing and we have to move along with it. So, in other words, get off our elephants and jump onto the cheetahs and see what happens. Charlotte isn't afraid of the future. Rather, she looks at future trends to provide insight into how to make better choices in the present. And one of her choices was to speak for us this morning, and we're all excited and grateful for that. We all know that change is accelerating. Everybody is experiencing that. And whatever hair we still have on our heads is in a flurry. And that's reality. Tomorrow rarely cooperates with our best laid plans. And I don't understand why my plans for tomorrow don't always happen, but I guess that's the case. So we need new ways to approach this world. And that means discarding our old models and embracing new mindsets while our global world is moving around at an incredible speed in the universe. Thank goodness for that. But if we use the trend lines of the future to explore our present, we can grasp the possibilities that are available to us right now. So welcome to Surviving in an Exponentially Changing World. And may I remind you that the Golden Gate Breakfast Club is an example of this. Charlotte is a world traveler, and wherever she goes, she looks for surprising experiences that she can't plan for. She's an author and a speaker, and next year she becomes president of the Global Speakers Federation, which is the organization that has all of the national speakers associations are members of that group. So next year she becomes president of the Global Speakers Federation. And Charlotte, I wish you the best of luck with that. With your presidential year. I was that president about 10 years ago, and I went to every national conference that was held that year. And all the same time, I was maintaining my global speaking business and my US business. It was a lift. So Charlotte, I needed someone like you to speak with before that year happened. And I think many of us in this room have things like this taking place in our lives, and we can really use what she has to say today. So let's welcome Charlotte Kemp.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Janelle, I appreciate your introduction. I do apologize. My information that you received might have been a little out of date, but I am just finishing my year as president of Global Speakers Federation. So I have been traveling around and visiting all the other associations. And while I was asked to come and speak to you today about the future, and we'll get to that talk, I cannot resist the opportunity to take liberties and share with you a section of my presentation for the Global Speakers Federation visits, because it speaks exactly to our question of the day. So if you will indulge me, please. Let me just share. And I'm going to start with this particular screen right here. So this is just a section of my presentation. The National Speakers Association, of which some of you are members, started obviously much earlier than 1997. I think it was 1973. But in 97, 4 associations came together and formed what was the original version of the Global Speakers Federation, was the International Federation for Professional Speakers. And those 4 associations came together. And when I started my year of Global Speaking Federation presidency, I wanted to bring a unique message while still recognizing and being able to share with all the associations the history of things. So what I did was I took the concept that Cavett Robert, who founded NSA, he started with, and he said, we're not in competition with each other as speakers. We're not in competition with each other in this network. When we come together and we work together, we make the pie bigger. And that is such a powerful, simple message that it really is felt all around the world. All the associations that belong to GSF or that would like to belong to GSF, they all have this concept, make the pie bigger. And here in Africa, we have Ubuntu. So I thought there's got to be a way to play with that. So along with a little bit of artificial intelligence and a whole lot of research, and then a whole lot of messages to my speaking colleagues around the world, I put a presentation together around this concept. I'm not going to take you through every one, but what I did was I went to every association and I looked for what was their version of this making the pie bigger, coming together. So for example, in the PSA, United Kingdom and Ireland, they have community spirit. In the United Kingdom, community spirit, it's friendship, loyalty, mutual support. In Germany, Gemeinschaft, community, social cohesion, collaborative efforts. In France, I'm sorry, I can get most of my pronunciation right, except for the French, but it's solidarity, unity, collaboration. Back in CAPS in Canada, there's camaraderie, teamwork, collaboration, mutual support. Then the ones that were the most surprising to me, we got in Asia, there's Kampung, there's also Gotong Royong, very similar, that's in Malaysia, mutual support, etc. In New Zealand, wait for this one, Whakawhana and Tanga. This is so important. This is our relationship with those in our past, present, and future. So there's Janelle. Janelle, you've been in this position of president of the Global Speakers Federation. How the GSF is today is because of what you've done. What I can do today is because of what you've done. And what I'm doing today is setting up people in the future who will take this role as we hand this leadership baton down the years. So that one for me was really beautiful, this relationship with the past, present, and future. The person who's about to come into the vice president role for the Global Speakers Federation comes from India. And she got me pointed in the right direction with their concept of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. The whole world is one single family. And what we experience in one part of the world does affect another part. So Nirja Singh is coming in into this kind of passing the baton on down through the years. And then, of course,
How was the train today? How's the BART?
We have...
Good, good. He's up for you.
A few people need to be muted, Pete. Sorry, Charlotte.
That's quite all right. And then, of course, we come to the one that we have been discussing today, Ubuntu. I am because we are. And I loved how Fripp actually explained that. She's president of your Breakfast Club right now because you are all together. And like any leadership role, we kind of pass that on. So I hope you don't mind my indulgence. The photo that we use, the image that we use right now for the Global Speakers Federation points to all of these different associations coming together as part of this. And behind, like just around the corner, are a couple of other associations that will be joining us in the future. So that was my contribution to your word of the day. I don't know if anybody wants to comment on that before I actually go to the real presentation I wanted to do, but I was just really wanted to share that with you to show you how what has happened in the States has actually benefited the family around the world, our speakers. Anyone want to make a comment or ask a question?
Well, you certainly made the question of the day have more relevance for everyone who didn't understand it. It's great to see all the different languages that say the same in their own magical way. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. All right, so what I'm going to now talk about is how we see things in the future, the work that I do as a futurist. I'm very open. I know you are recording this, but I'm very open if you want to ask a question or make a comment. I'll keep an eye on the chat box if anybody wants to pop anything in there. Because one of the things I believe about the future is that the future is co-created. So we make the future together. In fact, in futures thinking, the expression is futures with a plural, because it's not a singular future. It's not a future that one person achieves for themselves. When we plan for the future, we're collaborating, we're co-creating something, and it has to be a future that benefits more than just one small group of people. I mean, we can make a future plan. We can, really work on a scenario that serves just one group of people, but it's a poor scenario as far as I'm concerned. When we have the capacity, the intelligence, the creativity, everything that we need to make a future that actually benefits more people. So that's what I try and look at, rather than just making it kind of a narrow picture. So it is morning for you, but it's evening for me. So we're going to start with a little bit of a bedtime story. It's just an analogy to share here. But way back in ancient Persia, the tale is told of an emperor who was very successful. He had gone on a whole lot of missions. He had claimed a whole lot of land. He had a huge empire, and he's back in his court. And he's been entertained, but there's no raid on, there's no invasion. And so he's getting a little bit bored. He wants some entertainment. So he asks his courtiers to come up with a game that will entertain him. And so the courtiers go away and they come back and they present the emperor with various games, and none of them really impress him. And then one day, a courtier comes in and takes the old checkers board and has created new pieces and introduces to this emperor the game of chess, and explains to the emperor, who likes to go on invasions of other countries, how to play chess, how this is like a strategy war game, and explains all the different moves. The emperor is very impressed, very interested. This is wonderful. He has the courtier teach everybody else, and he starts playing chess with everyone. And now he wants to bestow a gift upon the courtier. So he says to him, "What is it that you want? How can I reward you for this very entertaining game that you have brought to me?" So the courtier, who clearly is an intelligent person, having invented this game, the courtier says to the emperor that he would like 1 grain of rice, please, emperor, doubled for every square on the chessboard. And the emperor looks down at the chessboard, looks at the courtier, calls the treasurer over, says, "Give him his reward," kind of scoffing at this man for not quite having it right. The courtier goes away, the treasurer goes away. The treasurer comes back into the emperor's presence a few days later, trembling in fear and dread. "Oh, emperor, we do not have enough rice to pay the courtier his reward." So the emperor asks him, what is he talking about? So the treasurer tries to explain what is the value of 1 grain of rice doubled for every piece on the board. At the beginning, the first couple of squares, it's not that impressive a number, but the minute you get over half the chessboard, that number starts to get really big. And the treasurer says to him that there's not enough rice in the capital. There's not enough rice in all of the storehouses across your entire empire for us to be able to pay this courtier what his prize should be. So the king is trying to understand this. He's grasping the gravity of the situation. He's getting embarrassed and annoyed. I beg your pardon. So he calls the courtier back in, and he has the courtier try to explain to him what is going on. And eventually he can't handle this anymore. And he does the kind of thing that an emperor can do. He says, "I'm not paying you your reward. In fact, you're going to be executed." And he sends him off to have his head chopped off because the number of grains of rice was too big. And that's a story we hear. It comes up very often, especially anybody in finance, when you're talking about the power of compound investing. That's a story we tell. Beg your pardon. But what is it that is actually going on? What are we experiencing here in terms of this big exponential number? We need to understand that as we're working our way towards the future. What is going on? Why is this a problem for us? What is exactly is it that we're struggling with? How do we respond? And then what happens next? So this is kind of like a meandering path into the future that we're all on. And we're going to start right here. What is going on? What is the problem with this exponential number? This is the number of grains of rice that it would have been. It is 18 quintillion, 446 quadrillion, 744 trillion, 73,709,400,000 grains of rice. That is over 1.4 trillion metric tons. That is what that little calculation, that one chessboard, what that actually meant. That is an absolutely inconceivable number. We cannot get our brains around it. And that is what we are experiencing so much of today in the world, because things are just so big and so fast and so vast. So that brings me to this topic called From Future Shock to Polycrisis. And it's a book that I've spoken on this a few times, and I actually put the book together and published it at the beginning of this year. And before we finish this meeting, I will share a copy of this book with you as a PDF that you are welcome to read. It's not long, it's a 10,000 word book. But it comes from two phrases. And a lot of my work, when I'm talking to people about futures thinking, a lot of my work is actually just helping people to understand what it is we're thinking. How do we think? Because we think we're smart enough, but we're not exactly grasping that we keep repeating the same old patterns. We keep repeating how things have been done in the past. And when we say that there are no options in the future, we're saying that because we just don't know how to think about the future. So I want to be able to introduce new ways of thinking about the future. So Future Shock, as many of you may remember, it was a book written by Alvin Toffler. And I have a small warm place in my heart for this particular book. There's a copy of it behind me here, but for two reasons. One is it was published in 1970, and that was the year that I was born. So I feel like through my life, I kind of kept looking back to this concept, and it's kind of grown up with me. But the second part is when I became a futurist, I've been a professional speaker for a while, but I kind of reinvented myself as a futurist, and I went back to study, and I joined the Association of Professional Futurists. It was a very humbling time because I was president of the Professional Speakers Association of Southern Africa and a student member of the Association of Professional Futurists at the same time. So it kept me humble. But I joined the APF and got involved in attending the meetings, and there's a very active news group. So people are sharing around the world what they're studying, what they're learning, what they're discovering about the future so that we can all learn together and we can make better futures. And I've been a member for just a few months when Alvin Toffler passed away. And the news feed was flooded with firsthand stories of people who had worked with him, spoken with him, and heard him speak. And I just felt that I joined just in time to be able to actually learn from him, and from his colleagues, and be part of that kind of history. So I have this warm spot, but it really is, the message in this book is really fantastic. Obviously, a lot of the stories are out of date. Some of the analogies are a little bit strange now in 2024, but what he was really trying to get at, not about the stories, was this concept of future shock, the shattering stress and disorientation that we induce in individuals by subjecting them to too much change in too short a time. He wrote that in 1970. I cannot imagine what he would think about the pace of life right now, having considered what he was going through in the 70s as being shattering stress and disorientation. So it's a really interesting concept because we feel this and we experience it very often. We see people really struggling with that idea. But I had this story about future shock mulling around in my brain. I wanted to be able to say something or do something in my work about this, but I couldn't quite find what the balance is. And then a historian came across my screen. His name is Adam Tooze. And Adam Tooze writes a blog. He talks about a whole lot of kind of geopolitical things that all kind of interact. This is a crazy graph. You do not need to have a look at this. But this graphic is just showing how things are interrelated. And what he's saying is that a polycrisis is not just a situation where you face multiple crises. It's a situation where the whole is even more dangerous than the sum of his parts, some other parts. So he'd been talking about this. He'd been talking about all the different social issues, political issues, economic issues, wars, invasions, hunger, turmoil. And this was, 2 years before all of the elections that we're having this year. And when I looked at those two concepts together, the future shock is about the pace of the world, And polycrisis is about the complexity of the world. And when you put those two things together, people do not respond very well. People get anxious. And when we are not thinking clearly, we're thinking badly, and we're going to be making bad decisions. So that's what the problem is, the pace, the complexity. Why is this a problem? What exactly is happening with this? I found this graphic, and my husband, who's very smart, animated it with artificial intelligence, which is something we can do these days. And I don't always share too much personal stuff, but I want to explain this particular image because, just go back to it there. Whenever I have a new presentation, I show my daughters. They are 25 and 22, and I want to get their input and hear what their perspective is on it, because my work is how are different people seeing this and reading this around the world. When I showed my daughter this picture, she said to me, that is what it feels like in my brain. She has anxiety. And when she has anxiety, when everything kind of really builds up and gets overwhelming, that picture illustrates what it is she's feeling. And that is what too many people are feeling today, because our world is too complex and too fast. And if that is what we're experiencing, then we're not thinking clearly. So having had that insight from her, I started kind of slowing down in how I look at how people are reacting to the world, how I look at how people are struggling with issues. In my leadership role with the Global Speakers Federation, with other bodies, when I see somebody who should be able to do something, but they're behaving inappropriately, they're reacting poorly, they're not able to actually execute on the thing that they're trying to do, I stop and consider whether maybe there is just too much complexity around what they're trying to do, or in their lives, or in my communication style. So I kind of keep revisiting all of those questions, because the idea is I want to be able to make it more accessible to people so that they can find a way to actually do the things they want to do without feeling this overwhelm, this anxiety about the world they're in. For those of us who are speakers or lecturers, or we run workshops, very often, I know I do this all the time, I'm so excited about all the content that I have, is that I try and bring it to everybody, and I forget that it's taken me months and years to grasp all of this and to get it on board. And now I want to be able to present it in 2.5 days, and for them to be able to go and do something amazing with it afterwards. It doesn't work that way. So we have to find a better way to communicate. So we talked in the beginning, right in the beginning, about the emperor. I want to introduce another royalty to you, and that is the Red Queen from Alice in Wonderland. And this is called the Red Queen hypothesis. So in the Looking Glass book, Alice Through the Looking Glass, there's a phrase where, in the story, the queen is running through her gardens. She's off to do something, and she's got Alice by the hand, and she's running fast, and Alice is trying to keep up, and Alice is stumbling and can't quite keep up with this queen. And she tries to tug her and stop her and slow her down and say, "Why are we running so fast?" And the queen says, "Now here you see, it takes all the running you can do to keep in the same place. So when we run, we're not making progress. We're just running to stay in the same place." And that is a really terrible thing for anybody to live in as an experience, but so many people are. So many people are grinding and hustling and working extra jobs and gigs just to keep up with their monthly payments, just to be able to get to the end of the week, to get to the end of the month. They're not making any progress in their personal lives. They're not developing. They're not learning. They're not enjoying. They're just trying to keep up. And they're having to run faster and faster all the time just to keep up. That's exhausting. But the Red Queen hypothesis isn't about humanity or economics. It's actually about microbiology or something like that. So it says a species must constantly adapt, evolve, and proliferate in order to survive. So we have to adapt. We have to find new ways to do things. We have to evolve. We have to leave behind models that we've used in the past, approaches we've used in the past, because they won't serve us anymore. Whatever got us here in our lives, in our career, won't get us there any longer. So we have to be able to get rid of that. We have to move forward. So we're adapting, evolving, and proliferating, or we are innovating, expanding, and succeeding in order to not just to survive, but to actually make progress to get beyond that. You will remember also that the Red Queen, when she didn't like people, she also cut off heads. So there's a theme going through here. And there's probably, all that anxiety in our heads. When it's cut off, when we're not thinking, we just actually slow down. We become dumb. We become unable to do the things we want to do, to create, to just to add more value to the world. And maybe you're not experiencing that. Maybe you are experiencing something different. Maybe the way you have designed your careers, the place that you're at in your careers is different. But please know that it's true for many people, that they are just trying to survive. So we want to be able to, especially if we're going to consider Ubuntu, we want to be able to understand how other people in our community or our circles or in our environments or in our families are not coping because they cannot cope with the pace or the complexity of life. So we know what this problem is now. We know that it's terrible. We know that a lot of people struggle with it. How do we respond? How do we get beyond just surviving? And this is the part of like futures thinking that is just really so interesting to me, is that there is actually so much available. So I could give you like a whole rundown because I get excited and I want to tell you everything. But I want to break it down into just three levels, and we build on those levels. So the bottom one is mindset. And just in the introduction today, there are people with an open, agile learning mindset who are here to grow, who are continuous learners. That is what you're about. That's why you're on this call and in this community, because you want to still be involved. You want your brain to be working. You want to be able to engage. So you have the right mindset. For a lot of other people, especially if they are in a survival mode, or if they haven't yet really embraced the fact that they can grow and develop, their mindset does not open them up themselves to learning new things. Their mindset is closed. Their mindset is fearful. That can be people who are in danger. So there are real, survival situations around the world today that people literally are trying to survive. But there are other people who should be able to make progress and they can't because of this. Sometimes they're young people, sometimes they're people without opportunity, education, access, resources. Sometimes there are older people who can no longer keep up with the pace of the world. And they start to kind of close in and they create a smaller and smaller world for themselves that they can manage. And their mindset is never going to allow them to develop and grow. But if you're here, if you're wanting to grow, if you want to embrace the future, if you want to encourage your children and grandchildren to do this, then we need to be really nurturing a mindset that is open to exploring these new ideas. So once our mindset is open, we're open to these ideas, we want to explore them, then we can look at the tool set. There is a whole host of tools that we can use in futures thinking. And there's also a whole lot of tools from business, from traditional business that we can use. I do want to say again, and I like this comment here from Randall, we're definitely talking about Will Rogers today. Even if you're on the right track, if you're sitting still, you're still going to get run over. So yes, we can't stay still. We have to keep moving. We have to find new things to do. The tool set does that for us. There's a model that I use. It's like kind of like a compass. And it encompasses all of the tools that you can use for futures thinking. So any futurist you ever hear, even if they don't know this model, anything they talk about will fall into one of these 4 stages. The first one is gather intelligence. So we're here today talking about this, exploring your ideas. You are gathering intelligence. If you're looking at trends, if you are seeing what happens in other parts of the world, if you are traveling to other parts of the world, you are gathering intelligence. So that is your first part of a futures plan, is gather intelligence. The second part is manage change. We know that change is inevitable. Theoretically, we're open to change. As humans, one of the things we need to recognize is that we're really open to change that we initiate, not so much when it's imposed on us. So when somebody tells us to do something. So for example, if you go to your GP for an annual checkup and the doctor takes all your measurements and everything else and says to you, okay, you're carrying too much weight, your cholesterol is too high, your blood pressure is too high, you have to go on a diet, you have to start exercising, you've got to get fit. The doctor's just told you the change you need to make. Your biggest mistake at that point is to go home and tell your partner or your family, because tomorrow morning, you're not getting bacon and eggs for breakfast. You're going to be kicked out of the house to go for a jog or a walk or something, because now they want you to be fit and healthy because they want you around, and this is the change you have to make. You are going to rebel at that. Even when we know things are good for us, we do not like to be told. And we've already talked about the American individualist spirit. You do not want somebody else telling you what to do. So when we are looking at change in our organization or in our families, when we're trying to encourage change, we can't impose it. It doesn't work. Even if we know that it's right, even if the people know it's right, that change is not embraced. If we can help them to feel like it's from them, their good idea, it's something they want to do. If you wake up one morning and you say, I know I'm carrying too much weight, I know my cholesterol is too high, I know my blood pressure is too high, I'm going to make some changes. I'm going to start exercising. I'm going to cut down on some of the bad foods. You're far more likely to succeed in that change effort because you initiated it. So that's what we look at when we're looking at change, is how do we get people on board with the change? How do we help a team to say, these are the changes we want to make because we want our department or our company or our industry to go in that direction. When you get people on board like that, it's so much easier than trying to force them to do something. So that's the change element. There's a whole lot of futures models there that we can look at change. There's a whole lot of just general good change information and data and models out there that we can use. So first one was gather intelligence. Second one is how do we manage this change? The third stage is describing the future. What does the future look like? And for me, that's the most fun part, because we're looking at good futures or bad futures, positive futures or negative futures, desirable, preferred futures versus futures we don't want. We can look at things like in scenario planning. When we talk about the worst case scenario, there really is a worst case scenario that we can design. We can also design the best case scenario, knowing that both of those are unlikely to happen. There'll be something in the middle, but because we've thought about them, because we've anticipated and considered what could happen, we've prepared our brains to anticipate that. We prepared our brains to look for signs and signals to gather more intelligence. We've also prepared our emotions, our brain, even our kind of body-brain chemistry to deal with the anxiety of a worst-case scenario or the crazy chemical cascade that happens when you're excited about something that's really great. We're on drugs at that point, but our brain is creating all those chemicals. We can't make good decisions. So we have to prepare the scenario, get past all of that, so that we can be more logical and have a better approach to the future. And that's the third stage of a future plan. And then the fourth stage is to go and test your data and then go back again. So gather intelligence, manage change, describe the future, and then test your strategy. And while there are futures tools that have been designed for that, any tool that you can use, whether it's like a SWOT analysis or just like pros and cons, anything like that, that helps you to consider that will help you to move forward in your own futures plan. So what I'm trying to demonstrate here is that it does not need to be as complex as the academics make it out to be. It just needs to be intentional about thinking about the future, and then immediately you can start making that progress. So we got a mindset. Once that mindset is right and fertile, we can then apply the tools, we can learn about them. But you would know from any hobby you've ever tried, just because you got the tool set and you watch a YouTube video doesn't mean that you can, bake a good looking cake or do a woodwork project that looks good. It's going to start off messy because we have to develop the skill set. And that's where we get to when we really dive into whatever is our topic. We apply these tools and we get more skillful at learning how to read trends, learning how to design scenarios, learning how to communicate change. We become better at that kind of skill as we practice and go along. So this is just like a kind of a brief overview of it. The point being here is that we've developed in our mindset, we've got all the tools that are out there, they're all online, there's a skill set we can develop. And once we do that, then we're prepared for the future. Not prepared, we're not future proof. Like a waterproof jacket repels the water so that you stay dry inside. You cannot future proof yourself. You cannot stay in your bubble and reject the outside future. You have to be future fit. You have to be future agile. You have to be open to what is coming in the future. That's what's coming next. But we can only do that if we've got a very intentional approach. What we're facing, though, is people who are either acting like that emperor, where they don't want to know they're going to cut off somebody's head if the news is bad, or we're behaving like the Red Queen, where we're just trying to run faster and faster. Neither of those methods work for us at all. The only way to go into the future is to really be intentional about it and open to those three stages: mindset, tool set, and skill set. And that way, we can actually start to embrace not just an exponential world, but a quantum world, a world where things can be in superposition, where we have to learn a whole lot of new language. And that is how we get past the future shock and the polycrisis to a world we can actually thrive in the future. That is what I want to share with you. But what I would love us to do now, and if we have some time, is to hear your questions or comments, because that's how we learn, is to kind of engage with that. So I'm open to however we want to do that part.
So if anybody has any questions or comments, if you use the little the raise your hand signal, and while you're doing that, if you do that, why don't you unmute yourself so that when you come to you, you're already there and ready.
Thank you.
So let's see, there's a hand. I see Ms. Fripp has a question. So, and she has unmuted. Go for it.
Thank you so much. This was very exciting, especially as I've been in museums looking back 555 million years.
Wow.
And seeing how brilliant scientists were in the 1700s. So marvelous. The future is incredible. I didn't quite know what the polycrisis was until you spoke. Now I know that makes perfect sense. What would you tell members of the Golden Gate Breakfast Club we should do in the next week?
Be curious. Curiosity. Yeah, so anything that looks a little bit scary, overwhelming, bewildering, like, you know, quantum science or anything, politics, a new technology, a new app, we just have to be curious and open to it. We don't have to be experts in anything. I'm a futurist, and I'm a late adopter when it comes to all technology. I let my friends and my husband work it all out. Once they've worked it out and got excited and worked out, you know, what hasn't got past beta mode, then they come and tell me this is what you need to learn, and then I learn it. So we don't have to be on top of everything. We just have to be curious and open. Curiosity is your first piece of homework.
Thank you, Charlotte. I really like that answer. And I'm just thinking in my own life, just keeping up with communication. I mean, there's so many ways in which that has changed. If we look at the technological, so today we're dealing with email and messages and Skype and Slack and Google and probably a whole bunch more. And people get annoyed with me when I don't respond to the methodology that they're using. And I wonder, I mean, and I really have no control because it's coming at me through my computer. I could ignore it. But so what do you recommend for that?
Yeah, a number of times I've thought to myself, I know this person has communicated with me, but I don't know what platform that communication was on. So I have to start going through all of them. It depends a little bit. When I was teaching people about social media like a decade ago, when we're talking about marketing to people, reaching people ourselves, when we're kind of reaching out to them, and we're trying to get our message out. We need to be in the right platform for where those people are. So I like to think of it as like real estate. So your website is your head office. It's on your own ground. You own it, and that's, you know, you can do anything you want to on your land. But when you rent space from Facebook or LinkedIn, or when you rent space from a real estate office block or from a shopping center, you have to abide by those rules. And if you want to reach people in a certain part of the city, then you need to have a shop in the shopping mall that's in that part of the city. So if you want to reach people on LinkedIn, you've got to be there, or on X or on Instagram, etc. If you're reaching out that way. But at a certain point in your career, you might be at the point where you say, I'm here, come and find me. I don't normally say that to most audiences, but you can say to people, you can kind of like leave messages, like on Facebook. I'm not going to respond to somebody's Facebook message because I very seldom go there. I'll find it like on Sunday when it's way too late, but I'll be on LinkedIn 3 times a day because that's where I want to do business. So you can kind of like leave a voice note and just say, if you want to find me, this is where you're going to find me. I hope that helps. But yes, it does get overwhelming.
Yeah. Maybe we should put some kind of a logo. I mean, I prefer being reached by email. I'll put an email behind my head. And eventually, that's the best way to reach me.
Yeah. What we've just done with the Global Speakers Federation is we've done a whole social media audit and assessment and everything. And we've reserved the name Voice of GSF on as many platforms as we could find. But we've left a visual picture there saying, hey, glad you found us. But if you want to communicate with us, please go there. So we're not trying to be on, we're not active on any of those places. We've just left a visual voice note to say, come and find us somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's a good idea.
Okay, all right. You have 2 more hands up, Janelle.
We have Susan Rowe. I think your hand is the next one that is up.
Mine is, yeah.
Who's this? Janice. Okay, Janice.
Yes. So, Charlotte, at first I was very overwhelmed, but when you finally broke down the tool set and the mindset, et cetera, that helped me. But what I'm experiencing in my work with burnout is fear and lack of control. And more and more and more individual contributors and organizations are full of fear because of lack of control and all the changes, the geopolitical crises in Ukraine and Israel, the economy, the election, and all these so much divisiveness in our world. And so I'm wondering, this is a big question and there's not one right answer, but how do you help people who are struggling? In my opinion, a lot of people are struggling right now. There's just so much going on, divisiveness, bullying, racism, anti-Semitism, so much going on in the world, no control, a lot of fear and anxiety like your daughter. How do you recommend helping people?
All right, that's a nice little question.
It's
pretty loaded, I know. It's a whole nother discussion.
It is, yeah, it is. Okay, so it depends on the kind of the conversation and the relationship that you have with the people you're talking to. And I do not want to sound at all flippant about it, but the point is, the first thing we have to do is acknowledge that this is true,
right?
That we are experiencing something, and every generation, every decade or two, people going, oh, this is the worst it's ever been, and then a little bit later they're going, oh, that was nothing. Look at what it is now. But the first is to acknowledge that this is real. We don't try and gloss over it. We don't try and pretend it's not. My other daughter, who's in the Netherlands, is experiencing existential dread because of the politics in the country that she is a visitor in. And certain members of the family are saying, you're 22, you don't need to worry about that. Just, you're being foolish. But I know that child well enough to know that that is a very real concern. And I can't pretend that the world is just going to be nicer and better. We sat down at the beginning of this year with my children and we spoke, and I said, you're not little children where I can pretend anything to anymore. I've got to tell you some real hard facts. I was held up at gunpoint a couple of months ago, and I kept that from my children because of things that were going on at the time. Like, this is real. This happened to me, you know, and this is how I dealt with it. And there was something else that we had to deal with. And then the third one was, your cousin has cancer and he may not make it to Christmas time. And it's really hard. It's horrible. But when we try to pretend or gloss or move past or not acknowledge, we make it worse because people feel like they're not being heard. So the first thing is hearing people, letting them say it, letting them sit there for a moment. There's an expression in coaching where we say we hold the space for people. And sometimes we have to hold that space for them to be able to express their fear and anxiety. And sometimes it's just really bad. Like, you know, there's only so much we can do with my nephew who really is going through a tough time. But for other people, it's to be able to say, okay, now that we've dealt with that, is there anything that we can put in place? Are there any things that we can make simpler, less complex, tools that they need, understanding? The book that I'll send to you, there's a little bit of a graphic, and I had quite a bit of fun kind of looking at what that meant, a graph of when we got the fear, the pace and complexity, all we're trying to do is cope. So we're like under the line. But if we get a bit of space, we can move beyond the line, and then we can start adapting. We can start growing and evolving and coping better and better. And then one day we can escape this kind of suction down here and get to a place where we're thriving. That's what we want to do. And for some people, we can help them to get there, depending on what the tools are, depending on what we're sharing. But for a lot of other people, it's just not going to get better. And for yourselves, so I hold the space for certain people, but then it comes to a Sunday and I will not communicate with anybody, and my husband holds the space for me so that I can just be a complete mess on Sunday. And then on Monday, I'm back to doing the work that I can do to make things better where I can.
Okay, and I just want to check in with our time because I want to know how much more you want for your conclusions. We've got 2 hands that are up right now. So Charlotte, to put we finish at 10 o'clock here, is that right?
Okay.
And then, so Charlotte, if we've got 15 minutes for that, so how much time do you
Sure,
need?
I don't need much in the way of conclusions, just I'll probably just conclude with something like really motivational. And then I'll share the book with you. So I'm quite happy to do the questions because I see that Susan's hand's also been up for a while.
Great, because these are the
Thank you
questions.
so much, Charlotte. I appreciate the acknowledgement. I want to reflect back something you said, because it's something that I think encapsulates. You said, you can't future-proof yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that that is something for you to embrace. Second thing is, you just mentioned being held up at gunpoint. Somewhere in there is a metaphorical story that I think you, when you're ready, to include. But what you talked about is the future and how we learn. I went to the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago, and they had an exhibit called The Science of 007, James Bond. Fabulous. But what was so interesting is every little gizmo that they showed that were in the movies, we now use. And the truth was the Broccolis, the family, it's not the vegetable, but the family that produced 007, they were very intent about reality. So they went to the inventors, they went to the MIT Creative Lab. So they were really light years ahead. And who knew then that what we saw Sean Connery and Roger Moore would be our phones, our little thing. But what I want is the pair of shoes that the blades come out of. That's the one that I want. But I really thank you, because I think embracing the future, if not, we become dinosaurs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they
I want to. Yeah, they do. Yeah, I want to pick up on the 007 stuff, because I didn't know about that museum. That sounds really fascinating. In my life, I think I've gone to Washington twice, once for an NSA conference, And on the third day that I'd been there, I counted up the full number of days that I'd ever been in the US. And it was on that day, 9 days. And I'd spent a full 1/3 of my entire time in the US in the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum. That was the only one I went to, because it's just, I could just keep going back there. I've come from a family of pilots and things like, it was just beautiful to me. But the thing about 007 or any science fiction is a lot of people look at science fiction, it's like it's either frivolous or it's scary. And it's scary because so many, like Hollywood, they have to have they have to make it into a movie to make a lot of money. They have to make it scary and exciting and everything else. So there are often these dystopian stories that come through. But if you look at all of science fiction, whether you're reading it or watching it or anything else, use a phrase called speculative fiction. So it's not about science fiction. It's about speculating about what the world could be like. And when we do that, any science fiction story becomes a scenario. And we look at the scenario and we go, do we want the world to look like that? No, we don't. Then what do we change here? And that's what futures thinking is you look far out and you say, that's bad for me. We don't like that. That's good. That's more preferable. What change do I need to make here in this kind of cone so that I can direct in that direction instead of in that direction? And that's all we're doing is living better today, making better choices today because of what we anticipate in the future. So right in the beginning, people were saying, Ubuntu, I am because we are, and some of you said you are because of your family, because of, you're kind of a product of your family and your experiences. That's where you are today. And that is true. But where we are tomorrow doesn't need to be on our past. It can be because of what we anticipate in the future. So now we get to actually take a bit of more agency over our own future so we can redirect it to the place we want to go to.
Right. Thank you. That's a great answer, Charlotte. Okay, what we're going to do now, we've got Carl, you've had your hand up for a while, so we'll go to you and then we'll go to Fripp, and then I think we'll be about the time when we'll give you the concluding remarks for today. Okay. So Carl.
All right. Okay, now we've discussed polycrises. How about the problem of poly solutions? And what I mean there is that, and we've touched on it, there's so many different platforms out there. Which one do we use? And a great example is Janelle loves email. And I think email is the worst communication device ever devised by man. Because every jerk in the world now has access to me, and I don't want that. And I paid a lot of money for this phone. I'm not afraid to use it. In a world where different people are finding different solutions, getting that to mesh is an interesting problem, I would think.
I've actually been thinking about this recently because I've designed an assessment for one of the talks that I do, and it's not a scientific based assessment. It's just kind of like an initial marketing thing, and I've worked hard in it, and I've got this assessment, and then I'm talking to other people speaker colleagues who've got assessments. I'm looking at some of the the actual scientifically rigorous ones that are out there, and I also have a bunch of the results. So I've done a whole lot of these assessments and things, and I've got the reports on my computer, and I'm looking at them going, if there's a team that is struggling with something and I go to them, I'm going to say, you're struggling because you don't have a good picture of the future. If my friend Ian goes to them, he's going to say, because you're not operating as a team. If somebody else comes along, and they're going to say, because your mindset is wrong, you're not innovative. And if someone else comes along, they're going to say, there's some deep woundedness and we need to do some meditation. And we're all going to come to that same team with our own solutions because of our paradigm. And the problem is that team will probably respond and do better for at least 50 or 60% of the potential solutions. So when we look at poly solutions, it could just be that our intention to do something positive is probably enough in a lot of cases to actually move forward. And then we're open to different solutions. We're open to exploring, but we have to be able to get people out of a crisis mode into a place where they're ready to start exploring. But it starts with that intentionality. So yeah, different solutions different platforms, there's a lot more work that has to be done to understand what is really beneficial about that.
And just one quick note, the one James Bond thing I always wanted was that passenger seat ejector seat there.
Yeah.
We should have that on Zoom.
That's so true.
That's true.
Check them and show them going into the universe.
But also in conversations, like when
Yeah.
you're working the room, can I just eject you out of that? Oh, yes. Great, Carol.
And I just want to say, Carl, with what you said about you don't like email. Email is now returning to be the dominant platform on which people communicate. So just put that in your head. And
I know 500 of them communicate with me daily.
Yes, they're connected to the world. And Charlotte, about doing little surveys, because people do them all the time. I'm coming to the conclusion that with AI, that what we have to do with surveys is to say, these are opinions and they're not scientifically validated, because to be scientifically validated today, you got to use AI. I'm reading surveys now they're surveying 20 million people. And I just ran across one with PricewaterhouseCoopers where they had 500 million data points in drawing their conclusions. There's just no way that people individually can do that.
Yeah.
We rely on this. So I just think we should see surveys as opinions of that group at that moment. And it doesn't say anything about the whole world. Go up to 500 million, I might start having some trust in you. So Rip, you had your hand up. What do you have to say or ask?
One, as someone who met a masked gunman in Golden Gate Park and chased him off, and I, of course, never told my parents. So I would like to ask, one, you got through this situation, and I think you're very wise not to tell your daughter. Was there anything in your training or the advice you give others that helped this be a happy ending story?
Okay, this is not normally a story I tell. I mean, especially because, the immediate past president of GSF before me is Martin Lascholnich, and he was in the car with me. And we were stuck in a traffic jam outside on the freeway, and there was an accident up ahead, and there was a township, so very, very poor people living in informal settlements, and they just took advantage of the fact that there were cars there, and they could, I don't know what they were hoping to steal, because they couldn't have got far with my car in the traffic jam. So Martin's sitting next to me, I'm driving, I look up, and there's this gun pointed at me. And we do not know how we will respond in a crisis. But I was just so angry and indignant that I would have my guest here, my friend from a different country, and that we would be threatened in this way. And so I yelled at the gunman. I yelled at him. I put my hand on the hooter and I made a big noise so that other people around us, were starting to pay attention. And then because I'd done this intentionally and learned this over the years, I was not in the middle lane. I was on the side with a grass verge next to me, but it was a grass verge with bushes and holes and things like that. But I always make sure that I've got an escape route. I've just learned that over the years, just in case there's a car accident in front of you, you want to be able to escape. And so I drove onto the side and I drove straight at the gunman. He jumped out of the way and then I drove along. Martin is trained he trained with the Buddhists, and he learned this tapping technique. So the minute we get past this, he's had a fright now, and he starts breathing carefully and slowly and intentionally, and then he's tapping, and then he showed me how to do it, and we did, and we were still stuck in traffic, but for like another hour, but far away from where these guys were, and we were fine. So by the time I got to it, I actually had diffused a lot of the fear and anxiety that would have built up had I been on my own or had I not thought it through properly. But I will tell you this, there was a song going through my mind. There's a young woman on TikTok who sang this song. Her name is Chinchilla, and it's all about just standing up to people, not being bullied, not being put in the corner. And I've been listening to her song, and it was playing in the back of my And I really felt like in that moment, there was this courage that I tapped into, that I just made a better decision rather than feeling a victim. So I've been very intentional, and as we're like hitting the hour, I kind of wrap up with that. I've been very intentional about facing fear, thinking about worst case scenarios. I've lost 2 businesses. I've had a divorce. I had things, but when we don't face them, when we don't really embrace the lesson that we're learning, then we're not growing, we're not learning, and then we've got nothing to pass on to other people. So because I've faced these things, I can give better advice to my children. I can, see them through their challenges because I know what I've gone through and not just survived, but thrived beyond that. And that's what I look at with the future. It should not be scary. It should not be overwhelming. We should not be paralyzed. We should be able to embrace this and learn and grow and encourage other people. So it's like, if we create hope in ourselves, that is something we can pass on to other people. But if we're scared, then we got nothing for anyone else. And that probably is the whole spirit of Ubuntu.
And I think sometimes we maybe make the wrong choices. I took after some guy who came after me with a big knife, and I just turned around and chased him. And I realized when it was over, I really felt like I had no control over my actions. But I realized when it was over, that possibly was a bad choice to make, somebody with a knife. But I did it anyway. Some gene in my past came out and forwarded me on. So Charlotte, we're going to, we're now at 10 o'clock. So I think, though, if we can keep this recording going for a little bit longer so that you can make your concluding remarks and give us the link to your PDF file, and then we'll turn off the recording.
Okay. I have the file that I can email it to you directly, but I can't actually share it in the chat, which is what I normally do. But I can send it to Fripp and to Janelle likes emails.
In our Zoom settings, we really need. Allison had the same problem last week. In our Zoom settings, we need to change the settings so that people can be able to share documents.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
But we'll get it. We'll get it to you.
All right. I will email it to you directly, and then if you can pass it on to others, that'd be great.
So do you want to just say a couple of concluding remarks to us? This has just been so fascinating and
thank you.
Exciting and much more than I expected even.
Oh, okay. I really do love this topic, and I know I get enthusiastic and I want to kind of share too much information, which is a bit overwhelming. But the whole point, the kind of purpose of my work is to give people agency over the future, so that we don't feel like victims, and to give them the tools to explore, to try something different, so that they feel like they can create something. I've just started a Patreon account, which is a complete experiment, but the idea there is to have conversation, to share things, to hear from people, and the people who are joining from all over the place, which is something very intentional that I do as well. So we got somebody who just joined from Ecuador, and I've got a colleague in Pakistan who often attends my sessions, and then I get people from Malaysia and the US and Canada and everywhere around Africa. The more we share and understand and hear each other, the better we are at the moment, but the better future we can make. The more we feel like we're connected and we're not isolated, we're not scared, we're not alone. So yeah, I just want to be able to kind of create that platform for people. And I'm very happy to engage in any kind of conversation around what that might look like for yourself or for the work that you do. I'm very happy to share some resources with you as well. But yeah, I think the kind of top things there was the curiosity about the future, being intentional about creating the future, and knowing that you have more options available than we sometimes feel in a crisis. That would be
and
it.
I think that involves curiosity, which you talked about.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Charlotte. This is, should we give her some more applause? I think for you, your automatic applause sound, but we would give